now. I think we're live. Okay. Hello, everybody. Yeah, maybe. Hopefully people can hear us. Hello, everybody. Welcome to Motion Design Hotline, episode 8, in which we're going to attempt to get organized. Sorry for the late start here, but I was actually trying to organize some things. Thanks, everybody, for coming and joining us in the chat. Those who are coming in early. Clark Kent's in here. We got Harley Pebley up in the house. Blanketito also. And it's wonderful to have everyone from around the world coming and hanging out with us. We are here, Kyle and I, to try to answer your motion design and After Effects problems. So if you have such things, let us know in the chat. We usually start it off with some kickoff questions. But Kyle, for those who don't know you, who are you and where can people find you?
I'm just a guy here. I'm just a guy looking at an Evan going to talk about After Effects. I'm a motion designer, video editor, trainer, etc. Based in Kansas City. I will be speaking at a few places soon, but I can talk about that now or later. I don't know.
We'll get to it later.
Yeah, we'll get to it.
Yeah. But yeah, and of course, I'm Evan Abrams, the guy you see most on this channel. Motion designer, educator, thought thinker, guru. Oh no. And yeah. So, wait, what are you pointing at, Kyle?
You.
Oh, that's me.
I have to think backwards, though, which is difficult.
Kyle and I have had a lot of Halloween candy and not a lot of sleep, so today is going to go great.
That's why today, it seems. Yeah.
That's why we're going to try to get organized, which is kind of a theme we wanted to kick off today. We've had a lot of questions on the stream, and if we don't get to your questions at the time, we save them, then we come back to them later because we're very resourceful. But we're going to start off because we had a lot of questions about how do I get projects organized? How do I keep them organized? We're just going to jump in. Yeah, we're going to dive in, jump in.
You jump and I'll dive.
Okay, good. Cannonball. Kyle, why don't you tell us about some tips you use to keep your projects organized?
Okay, I can definitely do that. Okay. I am real big on organization and streamlining and all that kind of stuff. So I'm going to throw some tips at you for both Premiere and After Effects. A lot of them carry over nicely. And these are just general things that I personally do. First and foremost, before you're even in your... I should have had this ready. Before you're even in your thing, where is, I don't know, here. Before you're even in your program, you're going to need to, organize your files outside of your project. I'm just here in, just here in a folder. So what I do is in my file browser, I create a folder for every client, and then I create a folder for every project. And so this actually should have been my client here. And so inside my client, I would make, my project. And then inside that, I would have various assets and stuff like that. But, that can get a little annoying sometimes if you're having to create that every single time. So there are a couple things that you can do. You could just create a folder tree here that has, my project, and it has like audio, graphics, project files, whatever you're going to have in here. You could just have one of those that you copy paste every time that you make a new one and do that. There is also a program called Post Haste that can create this for you. I will post the link right here. Here we go. This is the Windows download link, and we'll put this in the show notes as well. So what this does is this creates that for you. You just set up what you want your template to be. And then when you click Create Project, it will create a folder tree for you to keep everything tidy there. I think Evan's maybe going to talk a bit about actual file naming, but that's a thing that should not be underestimated. Name your files. Take a minute and make sure that they actually have names that are meaningful and worthwhile and that you can find later. Assume you might need to find this file a year from now and you're not going to remember anything about the project. Work accordingly. So now once you're actually in your programs, both After Effects and Premiere give you ways to organize your stuff. You can create bins here, which you should absolutely do, and name them. Put bins within other bins. Maybe you have one called clips, and then you've got shoot day A and all that. Like, take the time to organize this stuff, right? And then a thing that I am really big on is making use of the project panel in both Premiere and After Effects here. You can actually customize this a lot. So the first thing I'm going to do here is I'm going to hit the tilde key, which will maximize any panel that you're currently on. And what I like to do is just drag this description pane over here. And I actually like to use that for my descriptions. And you can see right here, I'm adding very meaningful stuff. But a lot of times I like to retain the original name of the clip because, of course, I gave it a meaningful name, ideally. You know, if you just have a bunch of stuff that's like clip 001, you know, maybe your workflow involves going through and naming all those. Maybe it doesn't. And if not, I like to use this description field so that I can use that for my actual comments, like close up of actor A and whatever. And another important thing to note here, let's say that you want an additional description field. First of all, you have a ton of stuff. I really like using the good check mark. You can sort things there. But you can actually right click here, metadata display, and you can fully customize what Premiere shows you. You can even add custom stuff, add property. So I could call this like more words. And then what do I want it to be? A text field. And so I could add this and just have as many custom columns in here as I want. So, you know, spend a little bit of time setting up your project to save yourself a lot of time later. A thing I do a lot is using markers, and especially colored markers. I color code my clips, which you can do both here in your project panel by right-clicking and choose label. And there's a lot of choices here. You can also customize these in preferences. And then I use a lot of markers both on my clips to like label pieces that I like. If I'm working through an interview or something, a lot of times I will mark them like this and add notes to myself, or maybe even like kind of roughly transcribe the thing. You can just, with any clip that's selected, you can hit M and it will drop a marker. You can see this one's green, so it's a little hard to see right now. If you don't have a clip selected, it'll drop a comp marker. As of a couple versions ago, we got the ability to Alt or Option drag on these and make duration markers, which are about my favorite thing ever. Also, I kind of like just making her dance like that. That never gets old, like making people go back and forth, right?
So you're going to be a great GIF maker here. You're making those boomerangs.
So you can obviously add notes, but a thing that I really like to do is color code these. And how am I doing it so fast? Well, let me show you. So by default, you can double click a marker and come in here and choose a color. And that's great. But if you go into your keyboard shortcuts editor, by default, the marker colors don't have keyboard shortcuts, but you can go in here and set some up. I actually set mine up so that it's Alt and then the numbers on the number pad, and I can bust through those really fast. So when I go through like a first pass on footage, I mark the heck out of it and do a bunch of color coding, like maybe by how good it is, how you know, the subject matter. Kind of depends on the project, but I find that really helpful. And then once I'm actually in a project, I use like red, yellow, and green to kind of mark, like when I get notes from a client, I'll put them in red until I work through them. And then maybe they're yellow until I've checked them or the client has seen them. And then when I'm done with those, I'll turn them green to show that they're done, right? And then you can do a lot of the same stuff in After Effects. You can color code your comps and media up here. You do have, again, this is tilde to open that up. You do have color tags here, and you can rearrange all of these fields up here. So if you want your color tags to be on the side, you can do that. You can, of course, sort by color tags, which can be really useful. So maybe I want my comps to all be fuchsia because I know that that's like what I'm going to look at. And then when those are open, that's the tab color up top as well. So a lot of times I will do that if I'm going to kind of have like like pre-comps that are used in other things. I'll figure out an organizational strategy that works for me there. And again, I will use these a lot of times, like even just for myself, like green means it's ready to be sent off to the client. So make use of all this color coding to just really organize yourself. And again, you have, if you right click here, you can choose columns. Where am I going? Comment. You have a comment field. And again, you can, put these in whatever order you want. A lot of times I will use this to remind myself, like, ready for a client, or approved, or whatever it may be. You have all this stuff that can be lots of ways to keep yourself organized, especially on big projects. So make use of it. Let me one more thing here that I think a lot of people don't know. This structure right here is it's a pretty simple thing, just comps, pre-comps, assets. And I'm just using numbers to keep those, organized. But every time that I open After Effects, it actually opens this template. And the way that I did that is when you're saving, you could just create whatever level of complexity of folder structure or full-on project if you're using like templates all the time. When you save, you can save as a template project right here. And so that'll be a .aet. And then under your preferences, when you are new project, there's an option right in here. New project loads template. By default, it's off, but if you turn it on, then you just have to show it what file you want it to load. And then it will always load that every time you open After Effects.
That is some dope stuff, man. That's,
yeah.
And I think a lot of people do not use templates for their lives, and they could stand to. Because I think we were talking about this maybe last week, where it was like repetitive tasks, shortcuts you can make to your life. A lot of people complain that, this stuff takes so long to do. Like, well, not if you know how to create optimization within your life. It's not enough to make a career out of this stuff. It's not enough to make beautiful things. You have to be able to do it efficiently so that you can also do it as a biz. There is that time efficiency that we want to get to. So
take a couple minutes now to save yourself those 20 clicks that you're doing every time you open a project.
Right. Well, that's interesting because some people are like, oh, what is it? I click once, I click twice. Well, if you can do something in one click instead of two, that's literally like half the clicks, right? And if you think about that, extrapolate that over an entire project, these savings do start to add up quite a bit. And that's, these little hacks, these little life hacks. I've got some things, I got some thoughts on organization, Kyle.
Oh, what thoughts do you have?
Namely that it sucks. No. So a lot of people, I think, were asking, I just remember these questions about, they were saying, I have a voiceover on a project. How do I deal with that? How do I deal with cutting up things, creating scenes, and all that? And in a roundabout way, we were talking about how, well, a lot of your organization is going to come from storyboards. It's going to come from other areas in terms of how we're organizing shots, what goes with what. But in terms of audio-driven things, if you think about your projects this way, that there are maybe more board-driven things, there may be more audio-driven things, there are things that are textual, and in a lot of corporate video, you're going to have a voiceover, and that's what you have, and you're going to have to make something in line with that, create visuals to support it, etc. I say that because this is very common to all the client work that I end up having to do, that it's a lot of textual-driven thoughts, right? So let's say, for example, we have this audio here, which I don't think people will be able to hear because I don't want to over. Actually, you know what, Kyle? If you're very quiet, maybe we can do this. I'm gonna try. I'm gonna try to not foul this stuff up. So I'm gonna throw that. So hopefully people can actually hear what my system does. You're watching a product demonstration of some kind of app, or it's me being very ironical in the audio. Maybe people can hear it, maybe they can't. But the idea is that I want to compartmentalize this stuff. I want to break this down in such a way that I don't have 100, 1,000 layers hanging out in here, right? So what I would do is I would take my audio, usually, I would leave one out there, and ideally the audio track, the voiceovers you get are already timed to the way you want them. But most likely they won't be. I'll be fully honest with you, that usually the space in between of sentences, of statements, isn't necessarily going to be the space in order to actually animate between these scenes, right? Those things aren't always going to line up. So when we take audio, we can split things. Command-Shift-D will split them. But I'd recommend you just duplicate to have a good one if you ever need to line things back up again. Command-Shift-D will split it. LL will let you look at the waveform, and you want to go through and maybe split this out into all of its component parts. So what do we have? I'm hitting a period decimal on the number pad. You're watching a product demonstration of some kind of app or maybe a startup. This is where we usually talk about synergy and a second thing and then a third adjective. All right, so then we would probably split it here. And of these bits that I'm splitting off, I would then take them and I would pre-compose them. I would want to turn these into discrete chunks. Unless, for example, I knew in my storyboard that these two chunks have to flow together in some way. So this is where you want to be deciding, all right, what flows into what goes with what. But this might be scene 1, or maybe it's, SO1 or something, some nomenclature that tells you we're dealing with the first scene, right? So, now I'm going to have a spinning wheel for a while. But the point is, you want to make sure that you're organizing this stuff in a certain way. Oh no, why is it spinning? Oh, Kyle, I've set my computer to do too many things at once. And now I'm going to pay for it. I'm going to pay for my thought crimes. Oh, I'm just gonna power this thing down, I think. Oh no, it's back. Okay, so when you're pre-composing, you can move all the attributes or you can leave them. I usually opt to move them, which creates this little capsule here, right? So it's locked. It's got the ins and outs. But inside here, the idea is I now have more footage than perhaps, inside here rather, I have maybe less space than I want if I'm going to have this come in and go out. So I would have to then go in here and go into the composition and just give myself a round number, right? I'm just going to say, you know what, let's make this 6 or something. Whatever. I'm going to give myself some space on either side. So now I've compartmentalized, I can do all of my work in here, and I might even need to split this up. Like I might need a little bit of breath between here to actually get my animation to happen. I often talk about these pieces being like trying to get 2 ships to dock with each other in the middle of an ocean, right? That the visual is going to drive and decide, and sometimes the audio is going to drive and decide. But when you break things up into little chunks like this, now I can deal with, and again, I can hit LL to bring this up, I can deal with massaging and pushing this around inside itself. And ideally, out here, we're going to end up with, this will be like number 2, and then we'll end up with, maybe we'll split this one here, like this, and then and this will be number 4, and then we'll go here, and hopefully people can still hear me. Kyle tells me that he has lost my audio, but maybe not. And this is number 4. I'm going to turn off. I'll just turn off my stuff here. Turn this off. Has this fixed? Oh no. Let us know in the chat if everything is just totally broken right now. But ideally, here on the timeline, you would end up with a bunch of these things going up the stairs and they overlap. And this should allow you to do the things inside each of the pieces without disturbing too much of the others. And if you need to move them around, you just shift them a little bit, right? So perhaps that will solve the troubles. But hopefully you end up with a bunch of scenes, discrete scene chunks, and you end up with one that you use for your assembly. So this is like your assembly space where you could assemble the entire thing. And maybe you need to put clips over top and clips underneath and all that stuff. But the idea is that you want to figure out how to compartmentalize these things. And in an audio-driven piece, you're going to end up having to make that choice right there. So yeah, hopefully that helps. We're gonna roll it on back. We've lost Kyle. That's the real problem. Is that Kyle has been lost. So let me see if we can go back. Maybe Kyle, you say things now. No, Kyle is the one that has been destroyed by the process. We're gonna try to get him back here. Please stay tuned while I try to get my co-host back in the chair here. But yeah, because we should be looking at the 2 shot. We should be looking at Evan and Kyle. But guys, this is our first our first major whoopsie of the program where I have lost Kyle from the thing. But we are collecting your questions, so if you have those, you make sure that we drop them into the chat, and we'll get them put into our big old spreadsheet of questions that we get to, and we'll see if we can get Kyle back in here. I'm getting a lot of question marks on my interface, but we never know. And in the meantime, though, let's see. What have we got? Well, Kyle's away. I can say all kinds of things. But I know that Vineet was asking in the chat whether it's compulsory to sort of have formal education. I think that's what Vineet was asking about, those kinds of things. Let's see. That. Oh, sorry. We're gonna sort Kyle out. Watch me live while we try this. The hard part is that Kyle is in Kansas City, so his feed comes into my office through a program called Wirecast, and then comes back out to all of you out there. So if something happens on Kyle's end, it doesn't get to me. Something in the encoding happens, doesn't get out. But we're working through it. We're gonna try to make it go. Kyle, I think you might be back.
I'm not sure what happened there.
I don't know. I probably deleted you in some capacity, but I think you're back in the 2-shot now. So
I'm back in the 2-shot. We're probably not going to have my screen, but we'll just work around that for now.
Yeah. Just share your screen if you can, but we'll figure it out.
Yeah.
Because Kyle, I'm glad you've come back because I need your opinion on something.
Okay.
Vineet Kumar was asking if it's compulsory to sort of have formal education, I think, in design. He says he's been working in graphic design for 15 years in print, and as you know, print is dead, and the internet's the box we're going to bury it in. But he's asking about what kind of training perhaps could help him out with that. I mean, I could tell you from my experience that self-teaching, self-instruction is totally fine. As a person who runs a YouTube channel that tries to accomplish that, I have a bit of a nested goal in there. But I don't think that, and I know in some countries, in some localities, formal education is not available, right? That formal arts education is not a thing. It's not readily available. But if you have access to the internet, you have access to all kinds of amazing places and resources to you, communities, and it really depends on how you learn, right? I think that's the main thing to figure out is how do you learn? If you're the kind of person that needs to be on a schedule, you need to have a strict regimented situation, then maybe something like School of Motion is for you. Right? That you already have design skills, so you can already make beautiful things. You just need to make them move. You're really just filling in the gaps in your knowledge. But figuring out how best you work and whether you require those formal structures, that is a very subjective question. I don't know. What do you think, Kyle? What's your place? Because
Yeah.
Actually, I wanted to ask. You went to like college, right?
I did. I have a film degree.
Right. You went for film.
Yeah. And I graduated college in 2003. So After Effects was still, I mean, it was certainly around, but, motion design, motion graphics, that was still like a pretty new industry at the time. And it certainly wasn't like a degree yet, or I think it was mostly a thing that like people were kind of messing around with. In general, I mean, like you said, it kind of depends on your learning style, but I would have killed for half the resources that exist now. I mean, like,
he'll do it. I've seen it.
I have. Internet video was barely a thing in 2003. Like, you at your fingertips, you have basically all the knowledge the world has to offer. It's just a matter of making the time to seek it out and making a commitment to do it. I will say that especially in the last couple of years, I have really leaned into trying to continue learning new things and hone my skills. And I've seen like huge amounts of progress in myself. I talk about School of Motion a lot on here because I am fairly heavily involved in what they do, and I TA for a couple courses as well. But like I have seen, people that started taking School of Motion courses 2 years ago and are now like, oh my God, that person is so much better than I will ever be. And they're like 24, and maybe you didn't like. I know there's some people that didn't go to college and are just doing online courses like that. And if you have the right kind of motivation, you can be really, do really amazing stuff like that. That's not for everybody.
Yeah.
So figure out what works for you, which I know is a nebulous statement, but there's lynda.com, which I will probably always call it that, even though it's LinkedIn Learning now. And just so you know, I don't know if this applies to the rest of the world, but at least in most of the US, if you have a library card, you probably have free access to LinkedIn Learning, lynda.com. Yeah. So like Google your library, LinkedIn Learning or lynda.com. It works for me. I know it works for a lot of people. So check that out.
Okay. That is
Skillshare has a ton of great stuff.
That is a pretty cool thing. I did not know about the library card.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, I mean, the other thing that's interesting is if you're transitioning from print, right, the fundamentals of design are still there. A lot of that hasn't changed. That a lot of what you already know can be applied. You just need to add that fourth dimension. And it might be more technical training, right? Because you just need to learn these new tools and some new skill sets. But it's not.
Well, you got to learn about how to think in time, which is definitely a different thing. But
yeah. But it's not the worst. It's not the worst move. And the other thing that is kind of interesting, if you're transitioning from print, anyone who was creating and commissioning things for print, let's say it's like a newspaper, right? Well, those people, in order for them to remain relevant, they need to produce more online motion type content, right? So a lot of those clients are pivoting into those spaces, and their business model is transforming. The kind of media they create is changing. So the kind of work may be changing, but I really doubt that everyone is going away. If there was an agency that used to work in print, if they want to survive, they've probably pivoted to be online.
They're making a bunch of Instagram ads now.
That's right. So those kinds of things. And I think, Kyle, this is going to be a perfect pivot. Watch this. Ray Cook had some questions about advice for organizing project and workflow that require various output sizes. So, for example, you start with a 1920 by 1080, but then you need to output banners and tickers, which are all quite different. Right. So that's a really interesting problem and a very new problem, one that I think is being solved with a lot of responsive kind of plugins or responsive thinking. It is the worst, though, is the absolute worst when you start and you assume in the brief and the direction is, hey, everything's going to be framed 16 by 9. It's going to be so good. So we're going to build in a lot of things, a lot of structures. All the animation is going to work in this way. We're going to frame things in these ways. And then comes the tilt when someone decides, hey, that's cool. Why don't you just change it to da-da-da-da, right? Yeah. So like going from 16 by 9 to 1 to 1, right? You're just losing the sides, right? So if you're already planning for this catastrophic event, then if you frame everything like a Wes Anderson movie right in the center, you'll be fine, right? But there are certainly ideas like, oh, wait, if the motion is coming from one side and then it's going to go over to the other side, well, then you would probably want the frame to track them if it's square, right? Because you would be losing that side information a lot. This is where like problem solving gets pretty crazy because if you're going to take a thing and resize it, how are you going to do that? What's that going to look like? What do we lose? What do we gain? Ideally, you really want those considerations to be upfront because if you know them upfront, obviously, it's not a problem if it's upfront, but the problem is when it's not. So I don't know, Kyle, because I think you have some experience with social media banners and the like. Any tips for these good people out there?
So I actually, I've kind of gotten out of it. I'm not doing as much of it the last couple of years here, but I started by doing a lot of, I did a lot of sports work for quite a few years, doing a lot of in-stadium stuff where I would maybe have, something for the main board that was a relatively traditional size, but then I might have 9 like ribbon boards in various sizes and aspects and whatever.
16 by 1,000 pixels, please.
Yeah, one of the semi-regular ones was roughly 10,500 by 48.
Yeah, cool screen size, right?
Yeah, it's awesome. I mean, it looks cool when you're there, but
yeah.
So a thing that I definitely did, and again, I would have killed for like a lot of the like master properties. Oh man, like short answer, master properties is probably a great way to deal with a lot of that. Like you said, planning things out in advance, making sure. Obviously, you're always going to have times where the client is just not, they're going to drop that on you at the end. And doing your best to work with them and like try to anticipate those things, try to extract as much of that information at the beginning. Because if you can't plan for it, you're going to have to, change things later. And if you have to design something that works at 16 by 9, but also square, but also like 16:9 vertical and whatever, like you're gonna have difficulty making a thing that looks good for all those. And so the ideal is like, well, can I have 3 extra days and a couple extra $1,000 to redesign it for all these? Because that's really the answer. I know that is probably a non-starter a lot of the time though. As much as possible, if you can build, let's say, we're talking something simple that's just like title graphics and whatever. If you can figure out the biggest you ever need that and build a pre-comp where you give yourself like some guides of what all the screen sizes are going to be, and then do your animation in there. And, you might even be able to get away with like just dropping it into a lot of those, maybe use master properties to make some little adjustments for how far it slides or something. But, I would, as much as possible, try to think about workflows like that, where you're making one thing that's kind of adaptable, and try to just get as much mileage out of that as you can.
Yeah, these are the kinds of things that will help. I mean, the main things are like readability, I think is important. If you have a very text-heavy thing, some of it will suddenly become unreadable because of what your reformatting has done. Or like, oh, now the screen size is this way. Oh, good. So this little detail is nothing. That's nothing now. Like screen aspect ratio is one consideration. I've done some sports stuff myself, and just this idea of, are people even going to be able to see this? Right? You have to have big moves, big changes in color. Your details are going to be lost because, like you said, this board,
and they're hundreds of feet away.
Yeah,
and also not paying attention. Right.
So how are you going to grab their attention with 45 or 48 pixels tall? Like, you think about that. It's only 48 pixels. That's not a lot of detail that you can put into this ad for, I don't want to say carpet cleaning or something, right? It's not, it's rough to be able to make those considerations. If you haven't considered it originally, it's probably not going to be good later down the road. So, but of course.
TLDR, try to get the client to actually tell you what all the deliverables are at the beginning.
Get that zup. And I think even more importantly, never assume, right?
Yeah.
And sometimes it's just as important as sparking the conversation to be like, oh, were you thinking about doing these? Yeah. And they'd be like, I hadn't before. Oh, good. Well, let's expand the billing on this project a little bit. So that can be a little bit of a value add for you. If you're doing something in 16 by 9, try to pitch them on doing it square, doing it vertical. Get your beak wet 3 times. Why not? Cool. Okay. Anything else? So, Kyle, what do you like in the pile that we've got? And everyone out there, we're coming up around halfway on this program. This is a program where Kyle and Evan attempt to answer your motion design and After Effects problems. We'll be looking at Evan's screen when it's example time now. But if you missed the first half of the program, hey, it's going to be archived for all time and all space here, so you can check that out. But yeah, Kyle, anything in the growing pile of questions which we pull from the chat and drop into our Millinote boards to save for our own edification?
Sure. Well, so Ken Joy Media had a question about organizing files off-site. I am happy to talk about what my solution is.
Because I throw all mine in a hole. I put them on physical hard drives and lock them away because I don't trust the internet. I am a Luddite in that way. And So I put them on solid state hard drives, and then it lives around. So that's how I archive stuff. But if you're talking about cloud stuff, that means you're thinking about sharing it with others and who has permission.
I think he's asking primarily about archiving.
Right.
It's not, yeah, backup and archiving appears to be what he's asking about. But
Okay.
I mean, it's a big conversation, and it's very context based about like what you do.
Yeah.
But
So yeah, talk us through your process, Kyle.
okay,
Take us in.
so I'll tell you what I do. I have looked at this stuff for a while, and as someone who does mostly projects that are motion design based at this point, I do have a couple big edits per year that I do. So I do have terabytes of backups. And like originally I was doing 2 local hard drives, which I do still recommend. And I have, this is a little older at this point, but I have one of these drive docks. Let me see if I can do that. It's from Black X by Thermaltake. And you can get things like this. And so if you're looking at local backups, instead of just buying yet another randomly shaped hard drive that isn't going to sit in a stack with your other hard drives and whatever, I do these. And then I just buy like these cheap like hard drive enclosures. These are like $5, and then just have these, because there's no reason to keep paying for enclosures. So anyway, that's one of my archive solutions. And then primarily what I'm doing, I back everything up physically as well, but I use Google for Business as my I run my email through there and stuff. And then I was part of a 3-person company for several years. And so my partners and I actually still share the storage. If you have 6 accounts on a Google for Business account, you get unlimited storage on Google Drive. Unlimited. So the 3 of us still split that. And so it's super affordable to have literally unlimited storage. And Google has this. I'm not sure if Dropbox has this feature now. I also use Dropbox, but more for like client sending. There's a thing called Drive File Stream that is just a folder on my computer, but it does not take up any space on my hard drive. It's all just to the cloud. So I just push things there. And so I use that for all my archiving. And also, like, if a client says, oh, here's 200 terabytes of footage for this 30-second edit, and I get to sit on that for months while we work through the project, I'll usually make myself proxies to actually work through and then just shove all that to Google Drive so that it still exists. But then I only, need some of it eating up local space. That's my solution. Yeah. But I'm a 1-person shop, essentially.
Right. Because when you have teams that need to be accessing these things and who has permissions, that's when things are going to get dicey and you may need a more managed solution. But, I'm a small person myself, so I keep it lean as well.
Evan is only 2 feet tall.
That's true. You can't tell because of this camera angle. It's something that we do not know. Cool. So I think that's pretty good. If there's any follow-ups to any of these, let us know. Let's see what else we got. Let's go back in the day here. We got back in the early part of the program. Blanquitito was asking, "Hey Kyle," sorry, I'll do the voice.
Yeah.
Hi Kyle. I noticed you use K-bar, and I'm trying to use it as well, but I'm having issues with JSX scripts not working. Namely, from the other Kyle Martinez, whom you sure know of. Any tips on Kabar in general?
Kabar. I do know Kyle Martinez. He's a good guy. And we've only ever battled via Twitter and via joke. So I'm trying to think here how much I can talk through since we have lost my screen feed. So generally speaking, let me see if I can just talk through this and get anything meaningful.
Okay, yeah, we're gonna find
out. So within K-Bar, I agree. There's not a ton of resources out there. There is a really great kind of starter pack, I would say, that I throw to people. my friend Patrick Butler posted a couple of blogs on his site. If you Google Patrick Butler K-Bar, you'll get it. Or I can post this in the chat.
You'll get it.
You'll get it. He kind of talks through his setup, and he made several custom icons and stuff. So I would definitely recommend like looking at that as maybe kind of a starter thing. And then as far as scripts and stuff, like I am not a scripting genius. I am a scripting barely dangerous. And I honestly, like, I get a lot of stuff from other people that have done these setups, and I know just enough to kind of temper stuff. But if you search around on GitHub, there actually are quite a few After Effects scripts and scriptlets, which is a thing that K-Bar can run, that will do a lot of useful things, and a lot of times you can just copy paste them right over. Without being able to show much, I feel like that's maybe the best answer I can give. But
hey, that's good enough for this program.
Yeah, maybe we'll do better in the future here.
That's true. I mean, when we're talking about K-Bar and all these good scripts and tools and all that stuff. One thing I was like, I really wish the people in the chat could actually post links. Which
I know.
Folks, if you were here really early, you saw us attempting to make that happen. We turned the option on and off, and nothing changed. It was pretty great. Really, really loving how YouTube helps us out in a big way. Kyle, do you want to try to tackle this early question that Clark Kent dropped on us? Mm-hmm. He was asking, can blank be done in After Effects alone? And in terms of whatever blank is, we're going to look at Evan's screen, and I'll take you through. He shared this spot from CNN. This is CNN International, CNN Hotels. And he was asking, can this be done in After Effects alone? Well, the answer is sure, but does it have to be? No. And in fact, I think what we're seeing here, more accurately, is a blending of many technologies to actually make this kind of thing happen. So we're going to run through the whole spot, and then I'll just go through some little parts on it and try to explain kind of what I'm seeing, what you might be seeing, and all that stuff. So, Kyle, I think you can see what's on my screen, right?
Certainly, yeah.
Okay. So kicking us off at the jump, this can all be done two-dimensionally. This plane, these clouds, pushing in, maybe moving a camera in After Effects, maybe. Then we come into this thing that looks fairly flat, right? But then, wouldn't you know it? Oh, it's going to turn. It's turning into a phone. Whoa. So this could all be done flatly, right? Could all be done Michael Flatley.
Yeah.
Lord of the Dance.
Glad we went to the same place.
That's right. But it could also just be done in Cinema 4D. If we're spinning a null around in After Effects, we can take that null's data, push it into Cinema 4D, have that drive this phone, and then the Cinema 4D part is taking over, and the phone is doing this move. And from this point on, you'll notice that this is now a static thing. It no longer has three-dimensionality to it. And it's interacting with a hand that is also two-dimensional. And this all this nice, pose-to-pose, frame-to-frame, all this lovely sort of manual work, you could do all that in something like Animate, and then bring those assets in. Hands are horrible to do all the time, but especially because this has a lot of nuanced hand motion. It's got a lot of thumb flexiness. I have concerns about their thumbnail falling off, but that's fine. But yeah, then we've got a bit of a 3D kind of a move, but it's so quick we don't really notice it. I don't know. Mm-hmm. So that could be two-dimensional, three-dimensional. Who knows? This could all be shape layers again. Oh, this hand is back. Hey, what's up, hand? And then we're going to do, that's got to be 3D, right? Probably. This idea of matching.
Go back and forth on that.
Okay.
I mean, a lot of these things might be easier to do in 3D, but are certainly possible with just, animated 2D shape layers too.
Yeah.
Elisa also pointed out Element 3D could certainly be used for some of this stuff.
Oh, sure. But we also have like Stardust. We have a lot of the Trapcode suite makes use of objects. There are many ways of combining two-dimensional and three-dimensional methodologies. And now this part. Okay, sorry.
Sorry. I was just going to say one last thing. Let's not forget that you can extrude shape layers in After Effects if you're using the Cinema 4D renderer.
Just extrude them,
yeah.
baby. So then we have this wonderful push in. Oh, we're zooming, we're pushing through. You know, kind of repeating that same motion going through. That all seems to be a fairly three-dimensional scene, which could be, again, this could be Cinema 4.
Could totally be done in 2D, I think.
Yeah, I mean, all of this stuff could be one way, could be the other. But I would theorize that a lot of this, to be more efficient in what programs do what things best, then you kind of need to think about, and this is something that comes back to, well, in the storyboard part, we're able to just say, okay, we're going to need fairly organic hands coming in here. Go back to our two up here. You know, we'll need these certain things to accomplish certain parts of this thing, and you can start to craft a methodology before you have to choose what programs to open. I don't know. But yeah, hopefully that is helpful in some ways. We do get your links in sometimes, and hopefully that's helpful to kind of break down how this stuff works. So that's it. Yeah, let's see
what is done and scoot it over.
Okay.
Trying to see. I have actually answered one or two sort of follow-up questions in here.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't know if any of those are good for.
Well, we have some follow-ups. Alicia, friend of the show, Alicia Goodluck, has some follow-ups like, how much time do you spend uploading, downloading, and how much storage do you use kind of per project? I guess they're sitting at about 250 gigabits to 400 GBs per project, gigabaud, all of the things. As a old-time Reboot fan, I can tell you don't want a lot of gigabytes hanging around, Kyle. They're dangerous.
I guess.
Kyle does not know what a reboot is. Folks, maybe that was a Canadian show. I don't know.
I think maybe it is.
Oh, dear.
I'm also searching for something that's an answer to one of the other questions. So
all my Reboot fans, get at me in the chat. Tell me about Dot Matrix and Bob and how that show really took a turn after season 2. If you want to see some wild computer graphics, Kyle, you got to watch Reboot. It'll blow your mind.
This sounds vaguely familiar. I will have to look it up after the show.
And then a GameCube would come down and they'd be forced to play this game. Anyway. So yeah, I can say in terms of the projects that I end up doing, I try to keep them all very lean. You know, I end up, it really depends on what's kind of going on in the project. Like there are some that are like maybe 50 gigabytes, maybe. But as soon as footage gets involved, that's when things get spicy.
Yeah.
So
it varies so wildly. Like I have one client that I'm doing a lot of social media ads for right now, and literally like most of the projects are less than 100 megabytes because I'm just getting like some PSDs that I'm animating. But then I just did a few that have footage in them, and one of them had like portions of hour-long clips that are like each 100 gigs a piece, and I'm using just a tiny piece of it, but like so it varies so much. I do have a couple edit-based projects that I do per year too, and those will be hundreds of gigs, if not terabytes sometimes. But then a lot of them are something that's built entirely in After Effects and like just shape layers.
Yeah.
So
it's all over the map. It's everywhere. I think that's why kind of estimating how much storage do I need? It's so impossible.
Depends on what you do. Enough is the answer. Always a little bit more than you actually have.
You need all of it. You need 100% of the storage all the time. Yeah.
So I have one of the things I was looking for actually has sort of answered itself because of a person who's here in the room. So that may be helpful.
In the room with you now.
For our next question here that we can answer.
Oh, also, Kyle, before you go on too far, Sean is asking if you still sell those cool shirts.
I absolutely do. If you look up on Gumroad, if you just Google like Gumroad Kyle Hamrick, or the link is on my Twitter bio, or I'll post it as well if you want some silly After Effects shirts.
And if you have trouble with your order, just get into Kyle's DMs. He leaves them open because he's a crazy man.
I do.
He's a lunatic. But yeah, I see you've highlighted some stuff in our shared board. You want to jump on that one next?
I have. So Brian Hopkins asked, and I hope the person who can actually answer this is still listening. Is there a good way to keep all your tools, scripts, plugins organized and installed on different machines, or when you're working on site on a client's machine? I'm always manually reinstalling stuff. So that is definitely an issue if you use a lot of third-party things like I do. My solution is that I mostly work here on my own machine. But Zach Lovett, who is a very smart person and I believe is here in the room, has a solution to some of that. And I have been frantically looking through his site to find... here it is. I finally just found it. He has a solution for at least the licensing of these things. You will have to install these if you're working across different machines. But for the licensing, I'll post this link in the chat here and also to the show notes, of course. You can kind of like cloud your licenses for those. And so at least you won't have to like manually redo it every time. Right. And yes, as Zach is calling out here, AE scripts, obviously most of the stuff gets purchased through there, but not everything. So not a huge solution. But the AE scripts plugin manager app can help keep a lot of that organized for you. So check that out there on their site. It'll help like track all your stuff and makes it a little easier to install on a new machine.
Oh man! So my buddy Tim, he's in town here. Just I guess he's getting a new server. There, he posted in the chat that there is never enough footage for him. He's over at a government spot right now and probably what amounts to like TV shows over there. It's wild. So you're going to go through a lot of things.
And probably I have a friend that does a lot of that kind of stuff near here too. And they're, tons of footage, but also they're like not allowed to like plug anything into anything or use the internet or anything like that. So
it's wild. You got to get all your stuff bespoke 2 years ago. It's nonsense time. Total nonsense.
As Zach just posted in the chat here, just for people who can't see this. So Zach also said the benefit to Dropbox syncing your licenses and stuff as well. You can put all your K-bar settings, flow library, stuff like that. Anything like that where a third-party script or extension or whatever is referencing like preferences or favorites that you keep on your machine, you can just tell it to be referencing that, that network location. So that'll at least bring a lot of that stuff with you.
Yeah, it's some wild stuff. Let's see. We got some other questions here in the chat, and we're on for another 7 to 10 minutes here. We've got Clark Kent, who's a big fan of the show. Clark Kent, friend of the program, who's asking. They have a hard time deciding if they want text or voiceover on their motion graphics. They always think about the importance and accessibility, usually including both. Is there a good way to go? This way, I know people who are hard of hearing or people with visual problems can enjoy the video. Right? So this is kind of important for a lot of reasons. I mean, one of which, let's say you're designing a project from scratch, right? You get to have conceptual control. You're producing this whole thing. You're deciding audiences and platforms. One kind of reason I would say you often would want the messaging to be vocalized or non-verbal is because a lot of people are watching content, ad content, all this stuff with audio turned off.
On the toilet too. I mean, let's be honest.
Right. Okay. So a lot of this stuff takes place. Just imagine that whatever beautiful ad you're making will be viewed on the toilet silently. Right. And that's kind of the situation that you'll be broadcasting into. But the other thing to, I think, remember is that some people choose to not hear things. So if something is very audio-driven, a lot of the information will be lost. Now, when you're thinking about language specifically, those who are going to try to, decode what messaging you have, if it's very textual dependent, if it's super important that certain words are put up there, right, you better make sure these are the essential words that people would ever need to see. If a narrative, if a message can be conveyed without specific textual words, That's probably the ideal. For me, anyway. For me, that's the ideal. I love text. I love text animators. I love fonts. But on the other hand, if you ever have to localize that, it's not going to be as good conceptually, because here in Canada, we deal with things that need to be in English en français, so and in French. And the trouble is that French words to say the same thing are a totally different length than English words. A concept that might be one sentence in English doesn't change idiomatically into French, and therefore you end up with a sentence to describe 3 words. It's not great, or the words are so much longer, etc. So we have those challenges. So that's why I often say, hey, well, if you can get rid of these words, is there an image that can show this instead? Think about that, maybe. But then you run into the idea of, well, not all images are universalizable as well. Right. Yeah. So it's all over the place. But if you're thinking about accessibility, you should have both, right? You should always have both. You should have the ability to do both. Another thing to think about in your design, and this is for long form pieces, where do closed captions go? Where do subtitles go? Maybe don't put essential information in this zone down here. Maybe this is not a cool spot to put it. Kind of like how you and I, Kyle, have put our names and Twitter handles in the place that subtitles will obscure.
Yeah, perfect.
Because we're a couple of dum-dums over here doing this program.
You really only need to see this once. Like, you don't need to look at my Twitter handle for the entire show.
That's true. But what if you say something that I immediately want to tweet at you about to correct you? It's impossible if it's covered up by your blah, blah, blah words. It's the worst. But yeah, hopefully that is helpful for people.
I think it's good to think about accessibility for your stuff. Let me see if I can say this without sounding like a jerk. If you are making a client project, that is something that you should be making them pay for, because it's probably a lot, potentially is more work. So, especially if they're asking you to make multiple versions of something that, we also need this with all the titles on screen. Like, cool, but if that's different from the original deliverable, like, kind of goes back to our earlier thing, and make sure that you get all that out of the way at the beginning of the project. Mm-hmm. So you don't deliver the thing and they're like, oh, this also needs to be in French, obviously. Like,
obviously.
Cool, but now I'm remaking the video, retiming half the video.
Yeah. Things are going to get real dicey when you're going to go from English perhaps to like Cantonese or, Korean, all these languages that use totally different character sets that are, one symbol can stand in for an entire idea sometimes, right? Which is kind of important to think about. So those kinds of considerations, I think, are fairly essential in any kind of design process.
Can I take this back to someplace nerdy just for a minute?
Yeah, let's get nerdy, Kyle. You were called out today on Twitter for being a huge nerd. This is nerd on nerd action. So
was that Dorka that did that? I think so. So one thing to point out, again, assuming that you know this from the beginning, we talk about master properties a lot, but there are some, and I think this is the thing that we have talked about showcasing, but we haven't yet. So maybe
more teasers for later.
You can, if you have a spreadsheet, you can plug that directly into After Effects, and particularly it's pretty easy to link up text layers. And so you could, if you knew in advance that a project was going to have on-screen titles in, say, 4 different languages, you could have a spreadsheet that has all of those, and then you could have things linked up, and you could pretty easily build After Effects to just like, okay, well, this uses the next cell down that's in French or whatever it is. So there are ways to work with this if you know that it's coming, that can at least help make it a little less painful, or especially if you're doing that regularly, that can help automate some of that stuff.
Well, that's the goal, trying to make life less painful. That's why we do this show, to alleviate your pain out there, people. But yeah. One last question I want to get to. Logan Pinney was asking, should I get Overlord? Yes.
Yes. The answer is
yes. Especially if you are doing a lot of conversion of things, or if you're moving paths back, if you do a lot of vector kind of work, I would recommend it. Also, Adam Plouffe's a good dude. Kick him $40, because his tool is hyper helpful. And you might not see, if there are people, if you're using Illustrator and you're making your layers all nice, If you never break those apart, never have to convert them into shape layers, that's fine. But I can tell you right now, if you've ever had to do it at least 10 times during a project, this will save you a lot of trubs.
It will.
And especially in your ability to just redraw, bring it back in, I'll do all this stuff. It's so good.
Can I make 2 related plugs?
You may make your plugs. We're coming to the end of the show. You can plug whatever you want.
So related plug number 1. I think I made it clear that Overlord is well worth the money. You will save that money like the first day that you use it. Plug number 2, if you're working with shape layers a lot, converting those things to shape layers, which is what Overlord does, it takes vector art from Illustrator and converts it to After Effects shape layers. If you are working with shape layers a lot, I highly recommend getting Explode Shape Layers by Zach Levitt, who's here watching us today. It can rip apart shape layer groups or put them back together, and also has some good tools for like selecting all the fills and all the strokes, getting rid of extra artboards and stuff. So that's a really great tool for that workflow. If you happen to be watching this today and you're going to Adobe Max, I'm actually giving a session on Wednesday that probably still has seats because it was added relatively recently about going from Illustrator to After Effects. So Overlord is a great tool for that. It's not, of course, the only answer to that workflow. And there's a lot of other, things that you want to think about. So if you want to hear more about that and you're there anyway and you're have a gap on Wednesday and you're not tired of hearing me talk already, then...
And if you're in the LA area, get at Kyle. Go have a chill hang at the at the
meetup. There's a meetup. I tweeted about it yesterday.
Okay.
School of Motion is doing a motion design meetup on the Monday night at Max. So if you're around, check that out.
That's right.
Find my tweet.
Yeah, and we're coming into the end of the program. So thank you all so much for being with us. If you have more questions, you can always tweet them at us. I'm at EC Abrams on Twitter. Kyle is at Kylesaurus Rex, spelled the way it is.
In a dinosaur way.
Meow. And, Kyle, it was great having you on the program. Always a chill hang here on the day after Halloween. Yeah, we closed the portal, we saved the world again, and now we're back doing this. Are you going to be here next week? You're not here next week.
I am here next week.
Okay, you are here next week.
After that, I'm gone.
Okay, great. Well, we're trying to keep all of our days straight. So Kyle will be back next week. I'll be back next week. Same bat time, same bat channel, this one. So hopefully you can all join us then. As always, I've been Evan Abrams. I continue to be Evan Abrams. And Kyle, thanks again for coming with us. And thank all of you out there in the world for coming out. If you enjoy this kind of thing, why don't you subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications so you don't miss when we do it again. For the very few number of people who come out, this is a secret club. You're all members of the secret club, and you get these.
Best club, though.
That's right. You get to nerd out with us. Thanks again so much, and we'll see you around the internet. Bye. I guess I should switch to this. There we go.